Hello, welcome to my podcast. I'm Becky and I can be found as Becky Burns Gibson on Pinterest, Instagram, and Ravelry. Today we're going to be beginning the Hourglass Quilt. And I'm going to take you from fabric selection through the construction of the quilt all the way to binding off the quilt. So first let's start with fabric selection. I have chosen Slow Stroll by Stephanie Lewinsky, and to make this quilt you need a minimum of 16 unique fabric prints, but you can have more. They just need to be in multiples of 8. So for example, I have 45 individual prints of fabric, and I have already cut them into 5-inch squares. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to begin construction of the quilt. I'm going to begin construction of this quilt top by making 2 patches. So just take your our end goal is to make 4 patches. So we're going to begin by making 2 patches. And I'm going to do this in batch. So I'm going to sew all of my 2 patches together. Have them ready. And then I'll sew my 2 patches to each other to make 4 patches. I have my 1/4 of an inch piecing foot on my machine. I'm setting my stitch length to 1.8. The default is 3.5. No, the default is 2.5. And I'm setting mine to 1.8 because the quilt will hold together better if the stitch length is smaller. And I have my Fons and Porter's gloves so that I can grip the fabric well. And I'm using a stiletto so that I don't get my fingertips underneath the needle. So now that we've got all of our 2 patches sewn together, we are going to iron the 2 patches. We're going to iron the seam open. There's some disagreement about whether or not to iron seams open on quilts or whether or not to iron them to one side or the other. But because construction of this Hourglass quilt top can be a little complex as far as nesting your seams goes. So I prefer to iron my seams open on the Hourglass quilt. Well, we've just finished making our 2 patches and making a nice crisp seam when we pressed our seams open. And now we want to make a 4 patch. So we're going to line it up along the center seam, and that's where we're going to pin it, because it doesn't matter if the edges match up. It matters if this center point along the seam matches up. So I'm going to have 124 patches when we finish with this. So I'd suggest sitting down with a good glass of tea and just take your time and get them all pinned nicely together. And then we can just sew down the side that we've got the pin in. And after that, I'll show you how we make the hourglass. Okay, so now I'm going to sew all these up in batch. One-fourth of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so we've created our 4 patches and we've taken them to the ironing board. We've sewn the seam, we've ironed the seam out, and what we're going to do now is we're going to sew our 4 patches to a coordinating 4 patch. So, for example, I'm going to sew this one to this one. So how we're going to do that, we're going to take a pin, and on the wrong side, we're going to place it in that point where all the 4 patches meet. And then we're going to take the other 4 patch, and from the right side, we're going to insert the needle. Okay, so now we have our points, our point in the middle matching up, because that's important. And we're going to pin it on either side to hold it together at the sewing machine. Okay, so now we're going to remove that pin from the center, and we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Okay, now we have sewn all of our 4 patches together at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. So we're going to lay it on our cutting mat, and Now we're going to remove our pins. Then we're going to place our ruler from corner to corner right through that middle point that we have so carefully created. Okay. Turn your cutting mat, and again place your ruler from corner to corner. Cut straight through that center. So now what we have are 4 unique hourglass pieces. And we're going to do this all the way through. And we're going to keep our unique pieces together. Okay, now we've made our cute little hourglasses, and we're going to iron these seam down to one side. We're not going to try to iron them open on this step because it's too difficult. So we're going to give the front a press as well. And iron them in sets of 4. And then have laid out your pieces the way that you want to sew them. And just stack them on top of each other the way that you want them sewed together. Okay, so now what you're going to do, we're going to sew this side to this side. So we're going to pin them together on the side that we will be sewing on. And just pin all of these together and all of these together. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to iron our seams open on our hourglass sets. So we are going to first finger press the seams open. Then we can hit it with the iron. Give it a little steam on both sides. Now we're going to take our coordinating hourglass set, place it in a way that's visually appealing. We're going to pin our seams, our center seams together, and then pin it all the way across. And we're going to pin it on the side that we want to sew together. Okay, so I now have 5 sets of 12 4-patch hourglasses, and I'm going to lay them out on the bed in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. And we've already ironed down the seam that we just created at the sewing machine. I didn't iron it open because this part in the middle gets a little fussy. So it looks as if I'm going to be staggering the blocks. Starts with the first one in the set and ends with the first one in the set. And it starts with the second one in the set. And it ends with the second one in the set. Alright, the next row begins with the third one in the set. And we know that it will also end with the third one in the set, because that's the way we're staggering these. Yeah, I messed that up. I've got to correct that. Go. Okay, this row starts with the fourth block in the set and ends with the fourth block in the set. Okay, the next one begins with the last block in the set and ends with the last block in the set. Okay, I don't have room to put all of the blocks on my bed. So I'm going to layer them. Hey, I'm typing.
Right now?
Yeah, right now.
Okay, I'm gonna shut this in.
Okay. Okay, so that worked out perfectly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to have 6 rows and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 columns. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just look at the overall aesthetics and see if there's anything that needs to be adjusted. Yeah, I think this needs to go like this. This like this. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I think this is the way I want it. Okay, so now I'm going to prepare these columns for sewing. So I'm going to stack up these columns in the way that I want to sew them together. And I'm going to use a clippy and an index card to mark which column it is. So I'm going to clip these together so I know what to sew together at the sewing machine. This is column 1. And I'll go down all the way through column 10, labeling it such as this. They're all ready to sew up. Okay, so we are ready to sew. I'm setting my stitch length to 1.8. We're going to sew these together. I'm going to unclip it and then pin the center seams together so that they line up perfectly. And then you can go ahead and line up the top and sew across and do this all the way through all your blocks in your column. Okay, and when you finish sewing together all the blocks in your column, then go ahead and clip the top of it with the number again. So I have all of my columns laid out on top of each other, and they're numbered and they're in order. And I'm going to take them to the ironing board, and all of these horizontal seams I'm going to iron, and I'm going to for column number 1 I'm going to iron the seams down, and for column number 2 I'm going to iron the seams up. And this way when we nest the seams together, there's not so much bulk. And then I'll continue in such fashion throughout the remaining alternating throughout the remaining columns, alternating which direction I iron the seams. Okay, now I am going to take column number 1, and I'm going to flip it over onto column number 2, right sides together, and then I'm going to take my seams, and each one of my horizontal seams I am going to pin, making sure that they nest perfectly and the seams line up perfectly. I'm going to go all the way down pinning. And when I get to the sewing machine to sew them together, they're not always going to perfectly line up. So I'll have to stretch at the machine. When you work at your machine, work between your pins. Don't worry about any of your other pins except the 2 that you're working between. And you want these seams to match up. So for example, this one, when I match the seams up, I notice that one is slightly bigger than the other one. So when I'm at the sewing machine, I'll just stretch it as I'm sewing it in between these 2 pins, and then everything will line up perfectly. So I'm going to continue pinning, and when I get columns 1 and 2 sewn back together, I'll be back. Okay, now that I've got 1 and 2 sewn together, I'm going to look on the other side of the seam and just make sure that I caught all of the fabric in the seam allowance. And I have. Okay, now I've got column number 3, fabric right side up, and I'm going to take column number 2, flip it over, and pin these seams together on the side farthest from you. And then I'll repeat this so on and so on through all the columns. So my quilt top is almost finished. It's plenty wide for a king size bed, but it needs a header and a footer put on. So I'm gonna buy some fabric that's part of this Slow Stroll collection, and I'm gonna put a header and a footer on the quilt top. Well, I have added the header and the footer onto my quilt top to make it longer, and I have created a quilt sandwich. I have the backing, and I laid it out with the wrong side up, and then layer on your batting, and then your quilt top right side up. And we're going to be basting with basting pins. You can use regular safety pins. They don't have to be specified as basting pins, but I enjoy using the basting pins. They're curved, and it's easier to get them in the fabric. So you want to pin together all 3 pieces with your basting pins, and if you don't have enough pins to use and you can't get out to buy any for some reason, then you can just use a needle and thread and do big basting stitches all the way. It's just, it's just to hold your quilt sandwich steady while you're quilting it. So it helps you not to have puckers in your fabric. I remember my mama quilting, and she didn't do this step. She took a long 2x4 and she rolled her quilt sandwich up on that 2x4, and then she placed that 2x4 at the end of her quilt racks, which were just made out of pieces of wood, and they were put together with vice grips. So that's a really good memory of Mama quilting. So anyway, I'm going to go down putting the basting pins in the fabric, catching all 3 layers, and I put them about a hand's the distance of a hand apart. And I'll do it all the way down this side of the table, and then I'll go all the way down that side of the table, and then I'll pull my quilt, what I've already basted, I'll pull it down, and that way I'll have a new section to start on the table, and I'll smooth everything out before I start putting pins in it. So the next step is going to be quilting. Well, the next step is going to be removing this extra fabric and batting that's on the sides. And probably an expert would tell you not to do this, but the reason that I like to do this is because this batting sheds a lot, and it gets all over your quilt and just bothers me. So I'll just cut it off square with the fabric. And what most experts will tell you to do is to start quilting in the middle of your quilt and work your way out. But I don't do it that way because I have a machine that's got a small throat space. So these middle parts of these king size quilts are difficult for me. They're not impossible, they're just a little more difficult. So I like to have the immediate satisfaction of getting things done. So I'll start all the way on the right side, work my way to the middle, and then I'll start on this side and I'll work my way to the middle. And I think I'm going to do a little free motion quilting after I get my hourglass part of the quilt done. I think I will. So here's the footer I put on. And I think that I will do some free motion quilting around these flowers. I think that will make them pop. And I'm going to be using a stitch in the ditch foot going this way, but I'm going to be using a walking foot going this way, because if I use a stitch in the ditch foot going this way and I use a stitch in the ditch foot going this way, I'll get puckers in all the corners. So I need a walking foot to go this way. So I'll show you all that at the sewing machine. I've got to get back to putting my pins in, basting this quilt sandwich. I have my stitch in the ditch foot attached. I have my Fonz and Porter's gloves on, quilting gloves, so that the fabric won't slip through my hands. And I have my stitch length set on 1.8. The default is 2.5, and I have moved it down to 1.8 for a more secure stitch. When I come upon a hump that my stitch in the ditch foot gets hung in, I press it down. I press the fabric down till I can get to it. There we go. See? I got it right over that hump. I'm using a monofilament thread on the top. It's an invisible thread, so you don't have to worry about the thread clashing with any of these colors. And my backing is gray, so I'm using a gray bobbin thread. Well, I have finished stitching in the ditch on my horizontal rows, and I've had a good result using the stitch in the ditch foot. But now it's time to sew the vertical columns, and I don't want to use a stitch in the ditch foot for that because it will make puckers when it meets my previously sewn portions. So it will push it down like this, and then right there will be a pucker. So I'm going to use my even feed foot. And again, I've got my stitch length set on 1.8. And when you're using your walking foot, don't have your speed set at the highest speed on your machine. Put it around medium speed. Okay, so I have completed quilting the hourglass section of the quilt, and I'm very pleased with how that has turned out. So now it's time to quilt the header and the footer, and this is what my footer looks like. It's I matched it up with this fabric that is in the hourglass. Matched it up, and then in the center of the footer I have this little panel, "In all things give thanks." So I'm going to be quilting that, and I'm going to quilt around the acorn, and depending on how well my machine handles it, I may quilt around these as well. And then in the green section, I'm going to quilt around the flowers. Free motion quilt to quilt around the flowers. And then this is my header. You see I have two panels on my header. Grateful, thankful, blessed. And then over here on the other corner, there is always something to be thankful for. So I think that I'm going to start with this one free motion quilting. I have my free motion quilting foot attached, and I have tested it on a scrap piece of paper to make sure that my thread is installed correctly on my machine. So first I'm going to go around these flowers. Now I'm going to check underneath just to make sure I don't have any nests forming. Nope, everything looks great underneath. So I'm just going to proceed forward. I need my gloves on so I can grip this quilt better. Okay, there I have my flower quilted. And I just need to proceed with the leaves. And I don't think I'm going to quilt the words because I think that'll look messy. So I think I'm just going to leave the words alone. Okay, so I have finished quilting, free motion quilting, the panels that I have on my header and footer. And because I was breaking so many needles, I had to slow my speed down to the lowest speed on my machine. And that made it a little bit of a slow process. So I'm not going to free motion quilt around all these flowers because that'll take too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do parallel lines going at 45-degree angle all the way across. So what I did was I took my Omni Grid, it's Creative Grids ruler, and it has a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to put that 45-degree angle, this one, 45-degree angle right against the edge. And then I took a piece of chalk and I marked it all the way down. So this will be my first line. This will be the first line that I sew. I can turn my speed back up now. So now that I have the first line sewn, I've got this bar inserted into my shaft on my sewing machine. Let me see if I can show it to you. See that bar? So I've got that inserted, so I will follow the line with that bar, and that's how I will make a parallel line all the way down. So I'm going to do that one time and let you see it, and then it'll just be a matter of sewing all the rest of the parallel lines. And I've got this set 2 inches out, so my parallel lines will be 2 inches away from each other. Put my gloves back on so I can grip more easily. Okay, so now we are at the point where we will be binding off the quilt. I'm so excited. So there's several ways to bind a quilt, and this is the way that I prefer to bind a quilt. I purchased double fold bias tape quilt binding by Wrights, and it comes in 3-yard packages. And I've got 4 packages. So what you do is you're going to sew your binding together to make one long piece of binding. So you're going to take the right side, so unfold it, take the right side, let it be facing up, then take a second piece of binding, unfold it, so take the right side and face it down on top of this one. And you lay them down at a 90-degree angle. Line up the edges. And then sew. I'm going to go ahead and pin this because I don't want it to move. Alright, so we're going to go all the way down to the end of this one. Right side facing up. Take your next piece of bias binding. Unfold it, place it right side down in a 45-degree, in a 90-degree angle. Pin those down. Alright, this is the last corner. So right side facing up. Okay, then right side facing down, make a 90-degree angle with the two pieces of bias binding. Go ahead, pin it down. Okay, so we are going to sew from this outer corner to this outer corner. Okay, not this way. Not from the point to the outer point to the inside point. Don't do that. Sew it from the outer corner to the outer corner. Diagonal line. My husband is fussing at the dogs. There's a bad spot in this bias binding. So I think I'm going to take out my stitches. Well, yeah, that's going to show up on the quilt. So, let me get this unpicked. It would be easier for me to just cut that part off than to try to unpick it. So I'm going to cut this bad spot out. See that bad spot? I don't want that in my quilt. So I'm going to do this again. Right side up, right side down. Stitch diagonal from outer corner to outer corner. Oh, see, now that's nice. That is very, very nice. Very nice join of my quilt binding. So now I'm going to take my clippers and clip it down to about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to do that on each one of these, making one long continuous strip. There's that one. That looks nice. Okay, now my binding is ready to go on my quilt. All right. I've got my stitch length set at 1.5. I'm sorry, 1.8. I have my stitch length set at 1.8. center of my quilt, which is right here. Okay, so we want to take the binding and we want to line it up, edge of the binding to the edge of the quilt. Edge of the binding to the edge of the quilt. And leave yourself a couple of inches to work with whenever we go all the way around the quilt and come back to this spot. We need about 2 inches to work with. So I'm going to start sewing about right here. And I'm going to sew right here in this groove. Right here in this groove. And I'm going to keep it lined up, the edge of the bias binding against the edge of the quilt, all the way around. And you want to stop when you get to 1/4 of an inch away from the corner. Okay, I need to stop 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Okay, so I'll mark me a spot to stop. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to raise my presser foot. Keep your needle in the down position. Raise your presser foot. Okay, so my battery just died. And I had to move you to a spot where I can plug my camera into the wall. So let's get back to what we were doing. We had stopped stitching 1/4 of an inch prior to the corner, and then we turned with our needle down in the down position. We raised our presser foot and then turned to, it's a 45-degree angle. All right, lower your presser foot and stitch to the corner. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to take this and flip it up like this. Like this. See? See, like that. So that it's like that. This is what you just sewn on. And then you just sewed that 45-degree angle here, and you just do this. Like that. and put a pin in it. Put a pin in it along the top so that it holds this in place right here where you want it. All right, now flip it down. And there you go. Now you are ready to get back on your sewing machine. Start sewing right here in that groove, matching up the edge of your bias binding to the edge of your quilt. Okay, I'm going to take my pin out. And doing it this way is what makes your mitered corners. And if you didn't catch it that time, we're going to be doing it 3 more times. I'm going to make a mark 1/4 of an inch from the end. Okay, that way with a piece of chalk. That way I will be able to know when to stop. Okay, it appears I'm there. Keep my needle in the down position, raise my presser foot, turn the quilt to a 45-degree angle, and then sew that 45-degree angle to the corner. Okay? And you see what that looks like? Right there. Goes like that, and then goes like that. Like that, goes like that. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it up like this. Yep, flip it like that. Put a pin in it. See, you flipped it up and made that angle right there. All right, now you flip it down. Okay, line it up with the edge of the quilt there. Okay, now we're just going to pick up sewing right here at the edge and go down. have made a mark 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from the edge of the quilt. And I'm going to sew up to that line. Okay, I've sewn up to that line. Now I'm going to, with my needle down, I'm going to raise my pressure foot, move the quilt 45 degrees, and then lower my presser foot and then sew off the corner. Okay. So next, again, I'm going to flip it up like this. There we go. Flip it up like this so that there's that diagonal. Alright, put a pin in it to hold it where you want it to be. Alright, now then flip this back down. Even it up against the edge of the quilt. And then we're going to start up here and sew down just like normal in the crease of the bias binding. mark a line 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. And I'm going to sew until I get to that line. Okay, then I'm going to raise my presser foot with the needle in the down position, turn my quilt 45 degrees, and then sew off the corner. Okay, so remember, we're flipping it up, we're making that sort of diagonal there. There we go, like that. Put a pin in it, then flip it down and line everything up and start stitching right here. As you can see, I just barely had enough bias binding to bind the quilt. That's with 4 packages of 3 yards each. So 12 yards of bias binding for a king size quilt. So what I'm going to do is real easy. I'm just going to sew this down. Then I'm going to clip the end piece off. And then I'm going to, well, actually, Actually, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take this 2 inches that I allowed myself at the beginning of the quilt, and I'm going to fold it like this. Okay? And then I'm going to do this and then sew it down and cut it off about right here. This way, when I flip it up, it would just be nice, a nice little seam there. So let me do it. So see, this is what it'll look like. This is what the seam will look like once the bias binding is folded over twice and sewn down. So that is where I'm going to start now. I'm going to flip my quilt over to access the underside of the quilt. And I'm going to place the binding on the back side of the quilt over the stitch line. And you can do a decorative stitch, you can do a straight stitch, you can do a zigzag stitch. I think I want to do a zigzag stitch. It's going to show up on the outside. But I think that's what I want to do. If I were entering into a quilt competition, I would slip stitch this by hand. But I don't generally slip stitch by hand. I usually just machine bind the quilt. Okay, so I'm going to set it to zigzag. And I'm going to use the default settings for the width of the zigzag. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, now I want you to look at this magical thing called a mitered corner. So see, there's your corner, and you flip the bias binding over, and you got this nice mitered corner on the outside, and then the inside you just roll it up and kind of make a fold in it like that. There we go, like that. Then you just sew this way and sew that way. And you end up with a nice pretty mitered corner. This is what it looks like after I sewed it. There we go. thank you for everyone who's watched this video. Let me know if you're making the quilt. Put it down in the comment section. It's an hourglass quilt with a few panels added in on the top and the bottom. And there is a book that I'd like to recommend. It's called The Quilting Bible, the 3rd edition, The Complete Photo Guide to Machine Quilting. This has helped me out a lot, and I think it'll help you out too. Until next time, bye-bye.